Dear friends, welcome back. Today we have yet another episode of Coaching Conversations, Excellence Coaching Conversations. And today I have a very seasoned coach. So pay attention. So before we begin, allow me to introduce this coach. This coach believes in emotional intelligence as one of the most important factors that make people successful in their careers as well as life, something that we all want. Hence, it becomes his area of focus. He believes that systemic approach to viewing our ecosystem can lead to significant positive changes around us. So hence, his area of specialization is systemic coaching, both with individuals and teams. So with that, allow me to introduce Coach Ramesh, Mr. Ramesh Sreedharan. So without any further delay, I would request Mr. Ramesh to share a little about himself before we get into the conversation. Welcome to the conversation, Mr. Ramesh. Thanks a lot for joining in. Over to you.
Thank you, Kiran. So I just want to add on just a couple of things to that great introduction you had. One is, I'm a master certified coach from International Coach Federation. I've been coaching for over 7 years now. I run an organization along with my partner. It's called Orenda. Where we offer much more than just pure coaching. So we would do a lot of work around emotional intelligence and things like that. So that's a brief.
Great. That's nice to hear. And also, I'm aware that he already has touched at least 300 plus individuals so far, and the count just grows. Sure. Something unique about today's conversation is that this conversation will have a focus on systemic coaching. And the later half of this conversation will have a deeper dive on systemic coaching with help from Mr. Ramesh. So do not miss out. Mr. Ramesh, so with so much of experience today, what is coaching to you?
So to me, coaching is about helping individuals understand their world better, right? And each of us, we have certain perceptions of the world, certain perceptions which we don't understand, some of which we do. But how do we understand it better? And more importantly, having that understanding, how do we make sure we do something with it, which brings a positive change or an impact in our lives and the lives of people around us? To me, that is coaching. So it is an action-oriented understanding of self.
Wow. Action-oriented understanding of self. So I would rather repeat that before I forget. That's a very interesting way to take back and think over it. You mentioned it's about helping individuals understand the world. I think a lifetime also nowadays, the way the world gets complicated, it becomes difficult. Even if you spend a lifetime, you probably will still miss out on understanding it to the best. And a better sense of understanding is something which would help each individual. Great. So with that, let's move to the next one. In your experience so far, who benefits from having a coach?
So, Kiran, I believe that anybody will benefit from a coach because whether it is a student who's trying to figure out what life choices they want to make, whether it is somebody in their midlife or mid-professional state where they're trying to figure out what they want to do next, people who have challenges around this, especially in the midlife, right? I mean, people are getting married, children, aging parents, priorities in life, those people, senior folks, when, figuring out what to do next in life after they retire. I mean, you look at it anywhere in your career or life, this can help because it primarily helps you to look at things differently.
In fact, you touched everything that that happens in one's life, starting with student, which often we think that's not an age where probably coaching helps. But I personally have experienced, I'm sure you have, where even at a student stage, a coaching conversation opens up so much for them on things that are important to them. Midlife challenges, I think no one has to introduce anyone to that. And getting priorities right, I think sets the stage for whatever happens after. And I think seniors and once you are moving towards the 50 plus, it's such a valuable time where sometimes you are blessed with more time and then you ponder over what do I do with that time. Not everyone are lucky to utilize that time very well. And I think nothing else can help, I can safely say this, than having a coaching conversation on that subject if it is important to them or important to one. Right?
Absolutely.
So I think it pretty much touched one's life cycle. So then let's move to the next one. One myth about coaching, because the world has myths around everything that exists. One myth about coaching that you would like to burst today for the benefit of our audience.
So with your permission, Kiran, two myths which I keep
Sure,
encountering all
please.
the time,
That's a
right?
bonus.
Uh, one is coming across not only people, but also sometimes potential clients who believe that only experienced people can coach. So if you don't have any previous experience, you are not a good coach. That is one. The second is, especially with coaches, the belief that to be a good coach, you have to have a lot of tools. You have to understand psychology. You have to understand psychometrics. Uh, and the interesting thing is none of this is important coaching. All that you need to be a good coach is to be able to provide that space for reflection and thought, and probably be a little uh, you know a nice little tough with your client if the client is not doing something with whatever realizations they have. I mean, that's really what it is. I don't think any of the others really matter. So there are situations where I found some very young people in personally experienced, extremely young people who are 22 or 23 years old, great coaches.
That gives me a lot more confidence as I step into my early years of coaching. So I think it's a very unique one from all the conversations I had so far. There is this belief. I think this is for the benefit of audience as well as coaches, and it opens the world for everyone. Is that only I need to look for an experience, and sometimes there is this another misnomer that someone who is experienced in that area.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which absolutely is not the case. I think, as you validly said, the critical factors, the ability to provide space. This is a deep subject. One needs to invest a lot to be able to provide that space for every coachee that comes to them. And then allow that space to provide that opportunity to reflect and think, I think is the next level. Followed by very unique one, what you mentioned, probably a parent has, typically in childhood, you see that little toughness with the coachee in a very unique way, because most of the times the coachee decides how this conversation will go, but the coach is a witness. He or she is seeing what's happening and then can throw in that curiosity, and sometimes that you can say that tough moment comes for them. The truth dawns upon them like shock, or like something, the boulder hits you or something. There's a fancy way of saying this. And then they pause to think about what are they doing. First up, I think they did great is to have a coaching conversation. Now, after having a coaching conversation, if progress is not happening by their own understanding, then they have a much more to think about. I think I'm just trying to travel that space. It's so interesting. You want to share something?
Yeah, absolutely. And you actually touched upon it very nicely, Kiran. It's the second part which is the most difficult. Reflection is easy because it's you're just sitting and thinking, right? But the action is the more difficult part, and that's where truly you help people as a coach. I mean, can you keep them to their commitments? Can you make sure that they do something about their realizations? I think that's important.
That's a very insightful part of this conversation because I enjoyed it thoroughly. So with that, let's move to the next one. One experience, memory of yours as a coach that you can share with our audience while taking care of the confidentiality part.
Yeah, lots of experiences, Kiran.
I'm
I
sure.
think this profession is probably the most humbling profession you can ever have, right? The sort of stories you hear, the sort of changes people make for themselves. But one actually stands out significantly, and it is because it is something which we talk about belief systems, right? And beliefs is what typically drives behavior. So this was a client who, and it's a lady client, a very senior person in an organization, who was completely confused about her career choices and personal life choices, right?
Mm.
And the reason why, so as part of the coaching conversation, so normally if you look at it, you just go into it. If somebody has a life choice or a challenge, you work with that person to understand what they want and help them get there, right? For some reason, I chose to challenge the client, right?
Mm.
And the interesting thing that came out was the belief that whatever she does, she has to take along her entire family, and it includes her mother-in-law,
Mm.
right? Who lives with her. And these are big things, especially in an Indian context, in terms of how your personal life affects your professional decisions and things like that. And what was holding her back is whether her mother-in-law will like what she's doing. Because one of the things that would have happened if she took her next step or next promotion would have been to move out of the country,
Okay.
right? Whether her mother-in-law will like it. And in the conversation, I just asked her a simple question: have you asked her? She
Mm.
said, no, I've never asked her. Then I asked her, what's stopping you? She said, I don't know, because I've never seen such a supportive, you hear about the stereotype mother-in-laws, right? But in her case, she's saying, I've never seen somebody who's so supportive, somebody who's even more supportive than my own husband,
Mm.
right? And that one conversation shifted everything for her. Went back, had a chat with her mother-in-law. The mother-in-law completely supported her in every way and said, if you want to go alone, do that. Your career is important and you're doing well in life. We are proud of you. Just go, right? So it was one of those very powerful, simple conversation. Took not more than half an hour, but the impact it had on that individual is significant.
Interesting. And I think, as you mentioned about the half an hour, it triggers me that many a time the time is not the function of the outcome.
Absolutely,
They say it's just about the
absolutely.
quality of the conversation. And I think I can safely vouch, now that I am a coach for the last 2 years and I can reflect back with everything else I did. No space can be as powerful as coaching if the coachee comes with that commitment, seriousness, and the coach does his job or her job right. Fabulous. I think it's an amazing experience. And I think the takeaways for me is one you mentioned in the beginning. I think for all the coaches, it's one of the most humbling role one can don. They don't feel themselves like heroes or they are the stars and so on and so forth. But they are, but they don't perceive ever themselves to be. And one more thing you pointed out, how beliefs determines one's behavior. If one pays attention to it, it opens a world of how it is true, and they can play back what all they did is rooted in the belief system. And as I think the world is full of career choices and personal life choices. And the last line I created myself when you were trying to share this experience is, often we end up seeing demons where there aren't any. I think this was a classic example. There wasn't
Absolutely.
any. Everything was good, and you that I think probably the coachee felt a sense of responsibility because with such a supportive individual as a mother-in-law, I am more responsible. I am supposed to be more responsible in making sure I live up to that kind of amazing.
Yeah.
See how it was, and I think you did in this case. The challenging the client seems to have done the trick for her. Fabulous one. I think
Absolutely.
coaches would vouch. Their life is full of such kind of a witnessing uh, things like this, but then still going ahead and creating one more time a similar space to another coach or a similar same coaches. Great. Thanks a lot for yeah.
But having said that, Kiran, I think it's also important to remember there are situations where nothing works, right? And It's always a question that we need to ask ourselves as a coach, what could I have done differently in that situation?
That's true. I think also that you need to be the witness and you need to move on. But I always say they said easier said than done. The coach definitely ends up spending that time reflecting upon why, what, how, what could have been different, and so on. So, and I think for some it would stay on for some time. So let's move on. For the benefit of audience, as I shared in the beginning, Mr. Ramesh comes with a specialization in systemic coaching. So obviously we need to get benefited from his expertise. So Mr. Ramesh, as you mentioned, systemic coaching as your area of research and specialization. For the benefit of our audience, if you could kindly elaborate, what is systemic coaching in short, if you were to share?
No, certainly, and it's certainly an area of passion for me because I see bigger impact because of this. So the way to look at this, Kiran, is see all of us, our minds are designed to think of whatever is immediate to us, whatever is around us, which is visible, and we always engage only with what is visible to us or what we see around us, right? Whereas what affects not only us, but also everything around us is probably areas which is not thought of, it's outside our mind, not visible. So, Peter Senge in his book, The Fifth Discipline, actually talks about a system by saying it's a perceived piece, perceived whole of elements that hang together to create a common purpose. So in any system, there's a common purpose. Okay. And it's a perceived thing. So the whole thing about this is that there is a common purpose. There is interconnections between components which sometimes we know of, sometimes we don't know of. So systemic coaching is about being more perceptive about what are those components which we are aware of and which we are not aware of, and how do we make all of it sort of work together in a more functional, dependent manner so that it supports the outcome. That's really what systemic coaching is.
What definitely I would request the audience to play back this portion once again to get the best out of it. I would also do. But I think what stood out while you explained this is how powerful perception is. Like, truly, in a common life, also, you say perception is reality. I think we all also accept reality is not reality. Perception is reality. And in that, you shared those two parts, what we are aware of and some things what we are not aware of. And I think in this interplay, a lot happens. I think please share, you're sharing something.
Yeah, no, I'm saying not that you're not aware of, you're probably aware of it, but choose to ignore it because you don't realize the interconnections, right? Because you're not aware of the interconnections and interplay. That's really what happens.
That's a big subject. In Six Sigma, we call it a correlation or that interactions between factors. So the interplay seems to have that power within it. So I urge the audience to definitely play this portion again to listen to it, get the best out of it. So we move to the next level on this. How do you see systemic coaching working its magic on individuals and teams, and if any examples?
Yeah. So I'll start with an example of an individual coaching engagement, right? So this was an individual who took on a fairly large role. Um, and I don't know why all my examples are women, Kiran, today.
It's okay. I think, in fact, I think before you say that, you proceed, I must interrupt. I say, I wrote a line here saying, how much in the example what you shared, how much a woman's shoulders, I think I was writing here, kudos. Because in the example that you shared, it's a fabulous thing. You are in a leadership role. You want to take an entire family along, including your mother-in-law. Tells a lot about that gender. I think it's doing probably justice by having the examples also around it. Please proceed.
Sure. So, like I was saying, this lady took on a large role, doing it for the first time. Extremely intimidated with that role. I mean, she's worked for the person who was doing that role till then. Who, that individual moved on and she took that role, right? And the problem with so during the conversation, the problem with the whole intimidation, like I said, was her visibility on what the role meant. Right? There's a job description, but a job description does not tell you what it really means. And just a conversation on who are your stakeholders, right? Broaden the vision for her completely. I mean, and she suddenly realized that there is so much she can do. There is nothing, and she can change the direction of the organization, because there's lots of stakeholders out there which so far the organization had not even focused on.
Oh.
Right. So just that like I said, some of these coaching conversations are so simple. Just sitting down and writing down who your stakeholders are made that difference for her. Obviously, next step was conversations around what she needs to do with it and all that. But I'm saying, so that's how the systemic view can change the impact of what it was. In a typical coaching engagement, I would have talked to her and asked her, what would she like to achieve? And she would have said, this is my challenge. Help me with this challenge. And you talk about her, right? It is not about the system. So the difference is that. Similarly, when it comes to a team, it plays out even more significantly. And I'm using corporate examples here because it's a little more easier to relate to and probably understand. And maybe that's the area that I work in mostly. But in teams, most of them are generally, especially in most organizations which are doing well, most teams you work with are already performing well. Okay, so what stops them from doing better? Because they're all highly highly driven people. Most of them know their jobs. So what needs to change? Only two things need to change. Okay, one is for them to understand whom are they impacting, why are they doing what they're doing. Okay, so that's the first question. For whom and for what purpose? So understanding the purpose makes a big difference in any sort of team engagement. The second is, whom are we impacting? Some of them, they don't even know how they impact those people and how those people impact them, and what vice versa, right? So helping teams manage those relationships itself makes a big difference. So and you can expand that system to wherever you like. So for example, you can talk about how do we as an organization impact the environment. So environment is what is known as ecosystemic coaching, is the next level, right? But it's all based on the appetite of the group that you're working with, the individual that you're working with. So the question in terms of what makes it different, I think this is what makes it different. You're deliberately working on connections which can, so it's like an addition game, right? The sum of the whole is much larger than the sum of the parts.
Yeah.
Okay? The impact is very high and you can see it. And especially in an organization, especially with teams, you can see the impact, which is a measurable organizational metric changing. So as a coach, you can even take which normally which is very dicey. You can even take the challenge of saying, I will help the team achieve this, and put down a metric.
Amazing. Right. Fabulous. So I think,
but having said that, I have not taken that risk so far. All my coaching engagements, especially
it's at next level altogether.
Yeah.
Organization also needs to be ready for it and be okay with it, because a lot more happens at that level. I think while you shared these examples, definitely the Six Sigma professional in me woke up explaining about how, one, I think using systemic coaching, what's definitely validated in these examples that you shared is the good gets better, I think, is not even point of discussion. The best gets better is where I think the game seems to be beginning. And in the examples like what you shared, recently I did a program in design thinking. It resonates so much with everything that space also talks about. Who are you doing for? Why are you doing this? How is it going to impact? And once I think that awareness comes, I think the teams definitely are much more aligned to that one goal or a common agenda. And any team that is aligned with one agenda, I think example quickly I can give is that Kerala, the boat race, they show how
Yes.
when everyone gets the rhythm right and all. I think that can be a good analogy. All the boats are super
Fantastic analogy.
efficient, and but one boat wins. Now, which boat wins? I think systemic coaching can play definitely a critical role in that success. That's comes on.
Absolutely. No, it's a great analogy. I never thought about it. Thanks for that.
I think that's a beautiful event, and I think to show probably in the training also it can be like how they win after how much training each
Yes.
of them comes. So thoroughly enjoyed this part of the conversation. So with that, we thanks a lot for sharing a little more detail about your area of specialization, systemic coaching, for the benefit of all our audience. So with that, we come to the end of the conversation. However, there is one bonus that you will have to help us with for the benefit of all the listeners. That is, there are so many who consider coaching as a career, and often it's a lifetime journey. So before they begin, what is that one advice that you can share with the wannabe coaches?
So before they begin, I think one is certainly for them to find or identify wherever they want to go for training, uh, which is so training which is focused on core competencies. Okay, because finally, end of the day, this was the first question you asked, right? I mean, um, the myth. It is not about experience, right? It is about those competencies which make the difference as a coach. So organizations which will help you build those core competencies is certainly one thing. Two is coaching is a lot about self-reflection. You know, it's not something which you can learn from some theory. There's no way you can learn it as theory. You have to be ready to go through that metamorphosis yourself. You have to be willing to let yourself do that, which means letting go of a lot of your ego, letting go of this mindset that I know all. And some of it is really hard, right? Especially for people who are very successful in their careers. So primarily these two things, letting go and making sure have a right place to train. I think these are the two most important things.
Fabulous. I think the keywords for me, definitely for the benefit of the listeners, I must repeat, is core competencies. It's all about that. Probably a whole life will be spent thinking on the core competencies again and again and again. And as you said, self-reflection. One is the competencies. You go to the school, you go to the institution, you pick them up, and from there it's your journey. And followed by self-reflection. And you pointed out something which might have the audience missed, but is very powerful, is the word you used, metamorphosis.
Yeah,
Lot
it is.
lies there. Being mindful, aware of it, I'm able to sense it. That metamorphosis is a key word that they can underline, make it bold, and pay attention to it because it will happen and it must happen in many ways. And
And with metamorphosis, it is painful too.
yeah,
Just like
goes without
metamorphosis,
saying,
right?
goes without saying. As you say, now the beliefs and what was that in behavior, so much
Yeah.
connected. And then, as you said, mindset. And when you shared the word mindset, it again played back to the often shared one. A coach cannot accompany, I'm using the word accompany the coachee to where he or she has never traveled or in sense of that the journey. So it becomes the coach's responsibility to keep that focus on learning every day. I think we have lucky to have two conversations. Both the second conversation will be a better conversation than the first one. That powerful is the space of a journey inward. Often they say that the coaches travel. So thanks a lot for that, standout response for the benefit of all those who are considering coaching as their career, because a lot of time, energy, and effort also and money goes into it. So thanks a lot for a wonderful conversation, and Mr. Ramesh. Before we wind up, for those who are interested to get in touch with you, what would be the easiest way to reach you?
Easiest way is my email, Kiran.
We'll share that.
Yeah.
And also, would you like to quickly share the path of your website through which your organization website, so it's the audience can make note?
Sure, it is orenda.net.in. ORENDA, Orenda.
I will also go ahead and feature the website in the description, as well as I'll try to feature the logo on the video, so that easy to make note. And it was wonderful for me, a great Friday to spend to start with. And for the benefit of the audience, so I really hope that this conversation was insightful and useful for you. And if you have any comments or questions on this conversation, please go ahead and drop a line in the comments. I myself or Mr. Ramesh will definitely get back to you, and that's a promise. If you have liked the conversation, please go ahead and hit the like. That's how we get to know that you have enjoyed the conversation. And please do feel free to share this link with as many whom you think can benefit from watching this conversation. And choose to click the subscribe so that every next conversation you get alerted whenever it gets uploaded. So thanks a lot for being a wonderful audience. And till we meet again, please be safe and take good care of yourself. God bless all. And once again, thanks to Mr. Ramesh for joining in today. Thank you, Mr. Ramesh.
Thank you, Kiran. Bye.